Hey guys, how are y'all doing today? Today I've got a pretty interesting video. It's from the channel Hazerds and Catastrophies. The video is called "A Day in the Castle" in 1218, the year. It's a documentary. I wanted to do it in two parts because the video is like 50 minutes long, and I think it's a bit too long to do everything at once. So I thought I would do it in two parts. I thought it would be very interesting to see what it was like back then. I think it were not very good times, but let's get into it.
Münzenberg Castle in the Wetterau region. This is where Eberhard von Münzenberg works. He's a castellan.
Münzenberg!
He's a successful manager, tacksman, master of ceremonies and head of the castle guard. It's his duty to protect the peasants.
Liegt in Fehde!
If peasants
Germany.
don't feel that they are being protected by their lord, the willingness to provide the fruits of their labor to support him will very quickly break down.
It's the year 1218, a time marked by brutal violence and conflicts and by a lack of standardized imperial laws.
I still find we need to start writing back then, how they were writing then, because look at that, was so nice. That is like art. They should do that again, make stuff like that.
Münzenberg Castle is already practically a bulwark, but there are plans to extend it with a new keep. Protecting the Wetterau is the top priority. But time and again, the construction poses new problems for Eberhard.
Also wenn der Bergfried nicht einstürzen soll, brauchen wir mehr Ringanker.
Eberhard is the go-to guy. No matter the circumstances, he'll find a way to make things
Did
work.
they put now mud on there? Yeah, they did not
Eberhard
have
wants to
anything
marry a
else.
young noblewoman
I don't
to
think
pave
it's
the way
mud,
to a
but-
glorious future. But he's an illegitimate child, a bastard, and doesn't have the right rank to marry into nobility. And there's a lot more at stake for him.
Wie willst du uns schützen?
He's a bastard, that's already, but still he needs to do everything there. good times being a bastard in that age. You get all the blame for if things goes wrong. Okay, at Münzenberg Castle. If I'm correct, that's pretty close by where I live. I live in the Netherlands,
The Holy Roman Empire
but that's
in
not
1218.
far away from the
A
border.
territory stretching from the Baltic Sea to Italy, ruled by the legendary
Yeah.
king of the Hohenstaufen.
Even where I live, like the Netherlands, right there, I live like, sort of like, I think if I do it correctly, like something, no, because this is, something like here. Something like here.
Dynasty, Frederick II. His rule is anything but stable. In the south of his empire, the Lombards revolt against him. In the north, powerful dukes try to diminish the young king's influence. To assert his power, Frederick has countless fortresses built. In an era without capitals, uniform imperial laws, or a civil police force, fortresses are centers of power with their own courts of justice. Protecting the surrounding towns is of utmost importance in the Wetterau. This region is home to one of the largest granaries in the entire empire. Münzenberg
They got all
Castle
the food
has to
from there.
manage and safeguard the fertile valley, the hamlets, and the city of Münzenberg. It's up to Eberhard von Münzenberg to guarantee that the castle can fulfill all these tasks. He's a castellan, a governor of sorts, and he's got his work cut out for him. The 21-year-old starts his day at
21.
dawn. As the castellan, he lives in an official residence in the outer ward. His house has roughly 100 square meters, making it 30% bigger than all the surrounding houses. Eberhard also has his own staff, A servant and a maid run the house for him.
It's nice.
Like all Münzenbergs, Eberhard wears red and gold, the colors of the family coat of arms. This way, it's always apparent which noble house he belongs to. By wearing his weapons on his belt, Eberhard signals to others that he has completed his knight training. He's as cultivated as he is a seasoned warrior. The long years of education are a privilege for such a young man. After all, Eberhard is viewed as flawed. The history of the Münzenbergs dates back about 60 years. Kuno I was the patriarch. He and his wife had 3 sons, but 2 of them died young. This is why their third-born, Ulrich, followed in his father's footsteps and became the lord of the castle. Eberhard is Kuno's youngest son and could become Ulrich's successor. But he and his siblings don't have the same mother, making Eberhard an illegitimate child, a bastard.
Yeah.
His mother was a woman of gentry status with whom Kuno I had an affair. The term bastard stems from the Latin word bastrum, meaning pack saddle. This points to the place where the sinful encounter was presumed to have unfolded, the horse barn. Extramarital relationships were quite common in the Middle Ages.
So wie heute, würde ich sagen.
Just like today, I'd say.
Wow.
Depending on how life goes, men had
They
several
went all to the
mistresses,
barn to
and
do some...
particularly so if there was a big social gap.
Die sozialen Unterschiede.
Bastards were in fact a frequent occurrence in medieval society.
Ich meine,
We're talking about a society without any birth control.
die Kirche hatte zwar immer diese
The church began pushing for monogamous marriages in the High Middle Ages, but with only very limited success.
aber das konnte sie nur sehr bedingt durchsetzen.
Being a bastard, Eberhard faces challenges.
Especially with religion, because that was back then heavy stuff.
It will be hard for him to find a wife, and he won't inherit anything. But he's good enough for work, and Eberhard can still count himself lucky. At least he's the castellan of an influential castle.
That's very true. I mean, he could have been a peasant, working his whole life for nothing, giving up all the food and only keep a small portion for themselves. I mean, he is living in a big house, servants, and I mean, he can also go to the barn if he wants to, because apparently in this age they're all going to the barn to go secretly, yeah.
Adlige Familien haben, weil sie ein
Noble families are family businesses, and therefore are interested in having a lot of staff.
auch möglich.
And that also means having many illegitimate children. They come in handy when a family gains rank and power or conquers territory.
Erobert.
The bastards are often used as representatives, castellans or managers of certain castles.
Von bestimmten Burgen.
Given his title, Eberhard ranks second in the hierarchy.
It's funny like how they say it, because apparently everybody had bastards, so it was a pretty normal thing, and apparently they had a lot of bastards with the housekeepers, but still it was not a good thing, but they could use them. It's like sort of, we need to make a bastard so we could use them to be a governor somewhere in the city when we are conquering their land. That's quite funny though. But it's funny that it still, like, it was viewed then as a bad thing, even though it was everywhere. Everybody had them. Yeah.
Right after his half-brother Ulrich.
When it comes to the castle's operations, the Castellan played an extremely important role. He was responsible for the majority of duties and tasks.
That requires constant control, foresight, and assertiveness.
A successful castellan has the skills that are necessary to negotiate with the peasantry, to deal with the leaders of the village community to make sure that the dues are paid, that the renders come in on time, that the produce that the peasantry are bringing to the castle is of an appropriate quality. He's the manager who makes the entire business work.
Eberhard works at least 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, to fulfill his duties.
You also have to assume that the lord of the castle was often away, traveling, and the castle still had to be kept up and running while he was gone.
On top of that, the castle and its residents needed to be protected at all times. We don't have a floor plan of Münzenberg Castle from the time it was built, and it has undergone architectural changes over the course of the centuries, but historian Dieter Wolf has reconstructed the original floor plan of this impressive site.
The castle was impressive, also highlighting the power of the Hohenstaufens, which is still visible to this day. When you approach Münzenberg from the south via the main road, it looked like this castle had been built for a giant. Such an imposing edifice was meant to communicate one thing: a powerful man resides here. He certainly is part of the king's entourage.
Can you imagine, like, I can imagine if you were born in that time, and with the technology you would have, and if you would see like such a castle so big, and then you must have think like, indeed what he said, like it's made by giants or something, or yeah, like somebody very important or powerful need to be here. Yeah, because probably if you would be living in a very small village, and if you would see like a castle like that grandiose back then, I can even imagine if somebody who would live like a peasantry like right back in that time, and they would see for example Constantinople, they would think it's, yeah, that would be funny to think what they would think, to see such a big magnificent city for somebody who would never seen such a thing. Yeah, that would be crazy. Would be crazy to live in that time.
Sicherlich im Gefolge des Königs.
As most fortresses in medieval times, Münzenberg Castle was also a fortified defense complex. Its ruins rest along an elongated conical peak with 20 meters of steep side walls. The basalt rock hill upon which the castle stood was almost impossible to conquer. 2-meter-thick walls were meant to keep attackers at bay. About 200 men were responsible for protecting the castle and for the surrounding villages. The Castellan was their commander. The core of the inner ward was called a palace, the main building with a great hall. This is where the lord of the castle lived and received guests. To this day, the anchor holds reveal where the ceiling beams once were.
Oh yeah.
And here a large chimney indicates where the kitchen was. The kitchen staff cooked and baked around the clock to make sure everyone was fed. Perishable foods were stored in cool...
It's like also such thick walls to keep everything. Yeah, of course, if you would be attacked, you need to have thick walls. But I mean, the wall's twice as thick as he is, if you can see it correctly there. It's crazy. And everything, like you can see, also relatively like small. It's not that like most people would just live outside of the castle.
And dark cellars. The chimney, several meters high, serves as an exhaust hood of sorts, enabling steam and smoke to escape easily. Not far from the kitchen wing was the eastern keep of Münzenberg Castle. It was built during the first construction phase. The tower is about 30 meters high, allowing the men to spot enemies from afar.
Oh yeah, you can see it like stretches out to here, all the way to here. Yeah, it's quite big. That's quite big. You can even see
a castle. It was built during the first construction phase. The tower is about 30 meters high, allowing the men to spot enemies
from... You can see here, there's still like a wall going through. So here would have probably were like the village.
Afar. A site map shows how the inner ward of Münzenberg Castle looked around 1218. Surrounded by a chemin de ronde, there was the palace,
kitchen wing,
a chapel, a keep, a granary, a workshop for carpenters and blacksmiths, and 2 stables for the many horses. A well secured the water supply. If war were to break out, the castle could run autonomously for about 3 months.
That's quite long, 3 months, like. But then I think you need to have enough storage for at least the granary and everything. If you would get sieged and they can hold out for 3 months, then yeah, you're quite impressive.
The outer ward was outside the actual castle walls, at the foot of the castle hill. There was a large farmyard, including the courtyard house of the castellan, a bakehouse, barns, workshops, and whatever was needed to maintain the supply of the inner ward. The castellan had to make sure everything was running smoothly.
The castellan is the interface between these 2 worlds, between the world of the castle and the nobility on the one hand, and the world of the village and the peasantry and the economic system that supports the castle on the other. A successful castellan can make sure that the entire system works.
Castellan! The steward of the castle is responsible for collecting fees from the peasants and for stock keeping.
Castellan! Bitte, ich muss euch etwas zeigen.
Eberhard oversees his work.
Bitte.
Wir haben ein Problem. Es geht um die Abgaben, die zu St. Remigius fällig sind. Die Bauern sind weit unter dem Soll. Sie haben fast nichts, was sie uns liefern können. Ihr müsst euch anhören, was sie zu sagen haben.
And all that despite the fact that the climate has been very favorable this year and the peasants have brought in record harvests. On top of that, the arable land has been increasingly expanded over the past couple of years to feed the ever-growing population. Technological progress like plows and carts and the use of cows and horses make the work easier and increase the yields. The peasants have to hand over 1/3 of their harvest. They keep 1/3 for sowing and the other 1/3 for their families and themselves. They don't only pay in crops. There are also special taxes paid in livestock, and the interests on the use of land and soil are settled with money.
It was based on a system of giving and taking. The lord of the castle could only survive if the peasants survived. So the farmers were forced to pay fees, but it was possible in good harvest years with the right climate conditions.
October 1st marks the Day of St. Remigius, one of the 4 main payment days in the Wetterau region. The steward keeps detailed tabs on how much every peasant owes. This is done using tally sticks. He carves orthogonal grooves into a piece of wood, representing how much is owed. The wood is then cut lengthwise. The steward keeps 1/2 while the peasant gets the other. It's a form of double entry accounting.
Very good faith.
Upon delivery, the steward removes grooves according to the fees the farmer has paid. A forgery-proof process.
Warum habt ihr so viel auf dem Kerbholz?
Yeah, that's true, because even though if the peasant like makes a new one, he still have that piece, so it's like, hey man, that's not possible because my stick looks like this. So, or you're lying. Well, for that time, quite a good system. Very simple.
Kurz vor Sonnenaufgang, wir hatten gerade den großen Wagen beladen. Sie kamen auf Pferden und nahmen alles mit. Das ist alles, was wir noch haben.
Nehmt es, Herr. Ihr Bestkleid.
The best dress of a peasant's wife. If she dies, it goes to the lord of the castle, a form of medieval inheritance tax.
Oh wow.
Sie haben sie geschändet und abgestochen.
Wer war das?
Sie trugen das Wappen der von Grüningen.
Von Grüningen.
Schon wieder die von Grüningen, immer dasselbe.
We have a city here, Groningen. I don't think it would be dead because that's Dutch and this is still in Germany. So I think a place that sounds or is like almost the same.
The von Münzenbergs have been at odds with their neighbors, the von Grüningens, for years. The dispute revolves around a profitable mill in Ruppertsburg, owned by the von Münzenbergs. This is why the von Grüningens want to seize the land around the mill. The peasants are the victims of this power play.
Okay.
In the Middle Ages, such conflicts were usually settled by a feud. This was the term for a legal form of taking the law into one's own hands. The city archives of Mühlhausen, Thuringia, are home to a copy of the Sachsenspiegel, an important book providing insight into the legal situation in the 13th century. Usually, the king and his lords are in charge of jurisdiction, but the sheer amount of conflicts burdens the system. There's no law enforcement either. This is why many take matters into their own hands.
One regional example for this is the feud between the Heldringers and Erfurt. It was about whether a bucket of wine, a fee between Erfurt and the Heldringers, is a debt to be collected by the creditor or to be delivered to him. So, in essence, it's about whether the Erfurters have to bring the bucket or the Heldringers have to collect it. This led to an almost warlike dispute involving 1,000 armed men.
Sometimes,
because they were not agreeing of who should bring or take the bucket, they would fight with an army of 1,000 men. So, can you imagine if like 100 or 200 people died only because two families cannot get into agreement with one another?
Feuds are caused by trivialities. Defamations, theft and adultery almost always end in violence and manslaughter to avenge the alleged injustice.
Of course, arbitrary law and violence were more widespread. It's not that people were crueler than today, it's just that they sometimes rather had to resort to violence to resolve conflicts. But even today, we can see the remnants of feudal culture in modern jurisdiction.
Eventually we're solving everything with violence. It's also, I don't know, human nature by this point or something. A bad thing, but sadly still going on.
If in self-defense or distress, we are able to resort to violence.
No.
However, strict rules govern feuds. It must start with a formal feud letter, officially declaring the end of the good neighborly relationships, the alliance or the friendship. From this point forward, the parties are officially enemies, but only once 3 days have passed.
Der Versuch, das Ganze immer wieder zu deeskalieren.
You can see attempts at de-escalation at every stage of the feud. This 3-day period, for example, was included to give them more time to think it over again, to renegotiate, to maybe have a mediator step in and say, think again. If you're really going to smash each other's heads in with your swords, nobody will win in the long run. Let's sit down again peacefully and try to find a solution.
That is very like that they, well, you can still see that today, that they're still sort of holding on to agreements. And in this kind of stuff, it's like sort of a gentleman's agreement in a way, like for 3 days, if you declare war, we're not going to do anything for 3 days because there are still maybe things that you said too hasty and you want to take back, or yeah, that kind of stuff. But like you even like that, like you still see it, for example, during the World War when the Allies and the Germans were in the, how do you say that, yeah, in their bunkers. During Christmas they stopped fighting and they celebrated New Year's and Christmas together, or it was just Christmas for like an hour, and after that they started fighting again. But still, you can see that even now, or like, yeah, through history, that it's sort of like a good thing, that it's still human, like keeping agreements with each other.
The 3-day period didn't change much. The feuds spiral out of control. Within the empire, more than 300 feuds were recorded in the year 1218 alone.
300
The estimated
feuds.
numbers are 10 times higher.
So all the families are just
The
fighting each
peasants
other.
are hit particularly hard. Without armed protection forces, they are at their attackers' mercy.
This is a relationship in which both sides have rights and duties. Medieval peasants are not slaves. If peasants don't feel that they are being protected by their lord,
they will
the
just go away.
willingness to provide the fruits of their labor to support him will very quickly break down.
Ja, wovon sollen wir leben?
This is why Eberhard thinks twice before taking away what little the peasants have left.
Hier, mein Beileid für deinen Verlust. Behalte das.
That's nice. That's
Wir haben
good.
nichts von einer Fehde gehört. Bei uns ist kein Brief der von Grüningen eingegangen.
Verzeiht, Herr. Aber wenn ihr uns nicht beschützt, wie sollen wir unsere Abgaben leisten?
Ja, wartet.
Yeah, that's very true.
Wie viel haben wir noch?
Eberhard
You
has to
need
make the
to
right...
you need to have them to make money, and without them you don't have money to go on battle or do the things you need to have to do as a lord.
right decision. After all, the peasants' fees are the main source of income for the castle. One third goes to the king.
It's like, what is that? Is that like clay or something? And they can write in the clay. Well, that's also very hand, but also not, because one wipe over it and it's sort of gone and you cannot remember what you have wrote down. But I've never seen some like that. That's quite interesting.
The rest is needed as stocks for the lord's family, the servants, guests, and banquets. Even Münzenberg Castle only has limited reserves.
Es reicht für 8 Wochen. Wenn das Gesinde den Gürtel etwas enger schnallt, vielleicht 12.
Schlimmer wäre, wenn noch mehr unserer Bauern ihre Höfe verlassen, um in die Stadt zu ziehen.
Ja, dann wäre die Versorgung der Burg langsam wirklich in Gefahr.
Landflucht war für die Burgherren ein Risiko.
Rural flight was an enormous issue for the castle lords.
Die Bauern.
And if life in the countryside was too hard, of course the temptation to move to the closest city, like Gießen or Frankfurt, was high.
Abzuhauen, ja, sich vom Acker zu machen.
Am Ende des Jahres erlassen. Und wir werden dafür sorgen, dass ihr besser beschützt werdet.
Danke. Vielen Dank.
And now that's okay. They're happy with that.
Dieser Kleinkrieg wird uns am Ende noch allen das Genick brechen. Wie steht es um das Bankett heute Abend? Hat die Küche alles, was sie braucht?
Da ist alles bereit. Die
And there's
Küche
still a
arbeitet
party.
und übertrifft sich
Bank-
gerade
banquet.
selbst. Ihr müsst euch
Banquet.
deswegen also absolut keine Sorgen machen, Herr.
Gut. Dann werde ich jetzt mal meinem Bruder von dem Überfall berichten.
Eberhard and his manager return to the inner ward. The path is lined on both sides with wild mint. The culinary and medicinal herb has inspired the name of Münzenberg Castle. Mint. Minze in German. Münze. It's 10:30 a.m. when Eberhard enters the palace. His half-brother Ulrich seems to be
Well, that's a good thing, because it smells like shit in that time. So if they're surrounded by mint, there should be a better smell at the castle there at the village.
As head of security, Eberhard has to explain how he can protect the castle and the region against the von Grüningens.
Bruder, komm, nicht so schüchtern.
Bruder, unsere Bauern wurden überfallen und...
Ich weiß. Hier, das ist schon 4 Tage alt.
The feud letter by their hostile neighbors, the von Grüningens. They want money and the mill to restore the family's honor after it has allegedly been tarnished.
Diese Halunken haben den Brief extra vor 4 Tagen auf Burg Assenheim abgegeben, wo doch jeder weiß, dass wir nie dort sind.
Vor 4 Tagen schon.
Als der Brief heute mit einem Boten hier ankam, war die Frist längst abgelaufen.
Yeah, and now you have skipped the 3 days.
Sie werden immer einen neuen Vorwand finden, um uns zu erpressen. Sie brandschatzen die Dörfer, nur damit wir ihnen Geld geben und den Frieden teuer erkaufen.
So kann das nicht weitergehen. Die Bauern verlieren ihre Vorräte und wir werden die Bauern verlieren.
Wie willst du uns schützen?
10 men work under Eberhard. They are petty nobility called Borgmannen. They are extremely well armed and command at least 500 men, all very fit for service. In emergencies, the peasants have to step in too.
Wir müssen heute Nacht in jedem Fall die Dörfer vor weiteren Angriffen schützen. Von Bellersheim, von Göns und von Treis patrouillieren mit ihren Männern in Rupertsburg und den Nachbarsdörfern. Das beruhigt die Bauern.
With this plan, Eberhard
He's a
proves
smart dude.
he's not only a skillful manager, but also has what it takes to be a commander.
Ich bin mir sicher, dass sie als nächstes die Stadt angreifen werden. Deshalb beschützt die Hauptstreitmacht die Burg und die Stadt Münzenberg.
The goal is to protect the peasants, but also the guests that are arriving for a banquet that night.
Immerhin haben wir Gäste. Heute auf der Burg.
Und wenn alles gut geht.
Okay, guys, that was it for today. It's quite an interesting video. They're having a hard time coming. The original video, like I said, is from Hazerds and Catastrophies. I will put the original link of the video in the description, and part 2 will be coming soon. Guys, thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.